Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 349, Kicking and Screaming, directed by Noah Baumbach, 1995. Now anybody who has known me, I will talk about this title, and I often recommend this title. This is probably my most frequently loaned out Criterion title. And I especially give it to anyone and everyone that remembers college and particularly remembers what happens after college. And also, this has been a very common occurrence. Whenever I pitch the title and I tell them Kicking and Screaming, I immediately have to modify it with, this was made in 1995, this was directed by Noah Baumbach. It has "and" instead of an ampersand, and there's no way that Will Ferrell's in this. I've heard the other one is kind of but anyways, but this is the title that I recommend. And obviously, as I keep recommending this, and also that I actually have loaned it out. Either I've loaned it out or I've carried it with me and I've arranged for viewings. This makes it one of my favorite films, and I'm also not ashamed of this. This is one of those titles that gets the I don't think it got it this anymore, but I remember when it came out, it got the what the fuck response. Like, what is this title doing here? But I enjoy this film for simply because it deals with an area of one's life that I knew all too well, and that is the post-college angst period, or the post-college ennui. And what this is about is a group of friends who knew each other in college, and went through the whole college experience together. And it starts with them graduating, or actually the night of their graduation, their commencement, and then there's the question, now what do we do? And they each deal with it in their own particular ways. The main character in it, Grover, actually what he goes through is he goes through a riff in a relationship he was in during his senior year that was initially just kind of a one last thrill kind of affair, but also could potentially be something more. But there was a big rift between them, and it's all because it's all in answering the question, now what? In his mind, he wanted to stay in Park Slope and just kind of slum it. For her, it was an opportunity to. Oh yeah, her name is Jane, played by Olivia D'Albo. She takes advantage of a graduate study opportunity over in Prague, and this quite upsets him, and this is what causes a little rift. And what he's dealing with is kind of the aftermath of that, as well as just finding the motivation to do stuff and trying to make some kind of living, but not really sure how, and just coming to terms with that. So that's one way of dealing with it. Another person in the group, Max, played by Chris Eigenman, who, by the way, got his start in Metropolitan, and I didn't really get a chance to talk about him when I talked about that film, but he's another reason why I like Metropolitan. In Metropolitan, he plays Nick, and he's sort of the most unusual standard bearer that you will have. He lives for the social life, but he does kind of come off as a snarky ass, and he plays it very, very well. And it's also no different here, slightly no different here. There's definitely snark, and there's definitely some cynicism. Already at the ripe young age of 21 or 22. He would much rather do his crossword puzzles than do anything else. And actually, in his there's a very revealing line in there where he says, you know, I wish we were just going off to war. Or retire. I wish I could retire after a lifetime of hard labor. Considering that he had, this was the summer after he graduated from college, and already he's thinking, you know, by the time he reaches 65, so he can like sit down in his chair and do crossword puzzles. And the other thing, he also tells himself that he does nothing, and he's sort of stuck in his sort of self-pitying thing. That's not quite the right word, but that's one way. That's another way of dealing with it. Somebody else tries to stay on unofficially for another year, and he does so with it through his girlfriend, and she's later kind of pissed about this. And then there's Otis. The scene that always makes me laugh concerning Otis is that at one point he and Chet, played by Eric Stoltz, who's the professional student in the crowd. These are the guys that stick around for years and years, long after their 4 years, and they still manage to stick around for several more years. I gotta complete the concentration requirements. Oh, I switched over to this, and I gotta finish that. And so basically, they stay on for another 4, 5, 10 years. I know somebody like this. I will spare names, but they have existed. They do exist, the professional students. But anyways, Chet's one of them. But anyways, there's this scene where Otis and Chet, they start this book club to try to keep some kind of momentum going. And the book that they decide to talk about is All the Pretty Horses. And so they meet, and Chet sits down and he gives some nice thoughts about the book. In some ways, it's better than the way that I come up with some of these thoughts on what I've watched, or what Criterions I've watched. But maybe this is the exception. But anyways, so he forms a few thoughts about this, and it's very clear that Otis has not read the book, and he's kind of looking at this as like, wait a minute, this is what you get out of this book? I thought it was supposed to be something else. And then when it was his turn to respond, he basically barely paraphrases, barely parrots what he says. It's like, yeah, you're absolutely right about this book. You know, like going to that prison and everything. It's just all great. And then at the very end of it, he says, and it's arousing, violently arousing. One of my friends I've showed this to, by the name of Max. I've dared him. I don't know if he's actually going to go through with this, and there's a part of me that also is afraid that I'm going to ruin his academic career if he actually does do this. But my dare was to use that phrase at some point in one of his classes, and he's pursuing a doctorate too. So it's like, you know, at some point in one of your discussion, either like in a discussion or a lecture or something, I want you to use the phrase violently arousing. So you could say why I like this film. It's because I understand. What it comes down to is that I understand it, and not just the whole post-college angst, but it's the type of college. They went to a liberal arts school. Now, Noah Baumbach himself, he went to Vassar, and in fact, one of his initial ideas was to actually film it there. Just like retread nostalgia, I guess. Where they actually ended up filming was Occidental College, because it was a Los Angeles company and it was very easy to get things done in Los Angeles. But what's great about this film is that I'm convinced it's one of those films where if you've ever been to a liberal arts college, you can easily, in your head, translate that location into your respective alma mater. When I watch Kicking and Screaming, I know where equivalent scenes would take place. If I were to set this in Williamsburg, Virginia, at the College of William and Mary, I know where those moments will play out. I know what dorms, I know what sort of posh garden areas would be there. I know, and I even know the towny bars that all of this would take place. And I think that's what makes it great. And it's not specifically named. The school is not specifically named. And I think that's part of the charm about it is that it's very much a story, and not so much. Well, there's a story. I mean, I seem to be saying a lot that there seems to be a lot of films that seem to eschew narrative, and this follows a narrative more or less. But at the very least, these are scenarios that can play out at pretty much any college, and I'm really convinced that if you've gone to a liberal arts school and you see this film, you can translate everything that goes on and you can put it within your own alma mater. Whether you've gone to any of the Ivies or any of the public Ivies or one of the Seven Sisters or just any well-known institution of higher learning, you can easily play that out. And I think that's fundamentally why I enjoy this film is that it's all about that post-college angst. It's that it's trying to answer that question, what are you going to do now? And not just answering that, but it's also and this is where I get a little bit personal. What I remember about that time. And interestingly enough, when this came out on Criterion, it had been a year since I had graduated from college. But the thing that I remember the most about college, and I still remember this too, is that it really was the happiest I had been. It was the first time, and so far the only time, which is kind of depressing. But it was certainly the first time where I felt like I could be myself and not be embarrassed by it, not be ashamed of it. If I wanted to pursue something worthwhile, I would do so. In fact, the best bit of advice came to me from my academic advisor, who was also one of my fairly frequent professors in the music department, obviously. The thing he said to me on almost the first day of class as a freshman, he told me, don't think of college as winning a race, because as far as you're concerned, you've won, because you're here at William & Mary. And the time that I applied, for every one of us that were accepted, there were 10 or 11 others who had applied. So the fact that I applied and was accepted to be a part of the class of 2005, that's already an achievement. So you've already won. So don't think of this as a race to be won. Just really think of this as a time to explore, to find out where your interests lie, what makes you tick, and what are you interested in seeing. And I'm actually very grateful for that. Some would say that that's probably the worst bit of advice one can give, and that probably has damned me in some respects. But at the same time, I am who I am, and I can only be myself, and I should be myself in the end. Preferably my best self, preferably be my best. But I believe that I'm made in a certain way, that I have a certain temperament and personality, and that on my time on earth, I should live that to the fullest possible way. I don't like feeling like I have to be fashioned and shaped so I can end up being a cog serving somebody else. I don't like that, and I try whenever possible to resist that. But that's just foolish youth talking, or traces of foolish youth talking. So anyway, so the point of all this is that I remember college very fondly, and I had a lot of good memories. I've had some bad memories in there, but even then I felt like I learned something, and that it was part of the experience, and what made it very special. And then having it all over, and for me, it wasn't simply that I wasn't a student anymore, and that you can do things as a student that you can't really do as an adult. It's not so much about that, but actually, what made it particularly depressing for me is that there was this, I don't want to say promise, but there was this expectation that the future was going to be better, that this was only the first step of a much longer story that's going to be more fulfilling and more gratifying and more edifying. If you think that was good, wait till you see the future. And for the first year, it felt very bleak. It didn't feel very promising at all. And the sad thing is, and I'll be very honest, almost 8 years later, it still feels like it hasn't been fulfilling. Yes, I've been able to accomplish some things, and there are some things I can be very, very proud of. But for every one of those, there have been about 5 to 10 other things that have dragged me down, that have pissed me off, that have wounded me, and it's just been very trying. So seeing this film is kind of it's a nice little, it tells me that I'm not alone. It tells me that what I felt is understood. And again, there's no real value judgment put on it. I think it just shows it for what it is, and then you just take it in as what it is. So it's not trying to make a point or saying that, oh, you should grow up, but it just kind of shows it in a fairly honest and ultimately, I mean, in a hilarious but also in a very touching way. And so that's why I like it without any shame or embarrassment. And you should be able to like the things that you watch. And certainly you should be able to like the things that you own. Yes, I know that I know that hasn't been consistent from review to review, but there are definitely some titles that I definitely hold very close to me, and this is one of them. So I think based on what I've said, that should give you an idea as to whether you like it or not. I definitely recommend it for those who have gone through the liberal, who have attended college and are fully aware of that big contrast between during college and after college. And I mentioned liberal arts colleges specifically, but I would say any college, because I've even shown this film to my brother Evan, and he attended ASU, which is about a far cry from where this is supposed to be, what this is supposed to evoke. But even he got that. Even he understood what was going on and what they were going through, and he can, even he got something out of it. Even though his college experience was certainly different from mine and different from what these characters went through. But so for that, I would definitely recommend it for. It actually makes a very interesting little graduation gift. If you don't know what to get for you, if you don't know what you get for your upcoming college graduate, I know this is February, so I know commencement is only about a couple months away, but who knows, But you're bound to know somebody who's going to graduate fairly soon, so you can either get it for him or just rent it for him and say, "Here, check out this title. I think you'll like it." And again, it's another. This is also a film where it owes a lot to screwball comedies, and particularly, I know Liptich is cited, and Preston Sturges is cited. So it's a nice throwback to that tradition. So if you're also a fan of more classic comedy, but done in a more contemporary setting and done with a contemporary scenario, then it's definitely recommended. It's also one of those films where there's a lot of quotable lines. I talked about violently arousing, but there's plenty more where that came from. So it's enjoyable in that way. And again, it covers an area of one's life that's it's quite familiar. So thank you for bearing with this sort of personal confession. But like I said, all of these, they're about my thoughts and impressions. So this is me talking. And again, you learn more about yourself than you do the films that you watch. So yeah, and that was Kicking and Screaming. And until next time, take care.